What's up, guys? Chicks Are Uppies here with another moto vlog. I want to talk about some stuff with the bike that I'm riding today. So in this video, I want to talk about the pros and cons of owning one of these. This bike in particular is a Kawasaki Z125 Pro. There is the competition, which is the Honda Grom, and there's probably a couple other 125cc naked bikes and stuff that I'm not aware of. But those are the main two, is the Honda and the Kawasaki. They're the main two in the market as far as competition with these things. So I want to get straight into it and talk about point number one being that these things are so freaking cheap. I bought this bike for $1,800. I think it was $1,875 I paid for it. And if you go ahead and total up, I've had this thing for just over a year. If you total up my insurance, registration, and all of the modifications along with the purchase of the bike, because I've got dirt bars, I've got a 12 bar, I wrapped this myself, some aftermarket turn signals, I've got some internal modifications like the heavy duty clutch and light and primary gear, and it all in, I'm not even $2,600. I'm like just barely over $2,500. So these things really can be cheap. These Z125s don't hold their value as much as the Honda Grom. I'm not entirely sure why that is. I'm going to guess because of reliability, because the Hondas do tend to last a little bit longer than these Z125s from Kawasaki. With these things being so cheap, insurance is significantly cheaper because they're a much slower bike. They're a lower CC. They're much less susceptible to somebody being an idiot and speeding on them, because you literally can't. The thing tops out at like 65. If you're speeding in like a 30, I mean, that thing says to slow down. Yeah, I mean, you can speed, but you're not going to do speeds that are going to, you know, be felony speeding and put you at a higher risk, which is the way insurance sees it, is because that's typically what the sport bikes are used for. They're race bikes, they're track bikes. People speed on them. That's why people are seen as a high risk with them. But anyways, insurance is going to be cheaper. This thing gets like 80 or 90 miles to the gallon, and it's got like a 1.3 gallon tank, so you get like 130 miles on a tank. And with the way gas prices are right now, even for premium, I always put premium in this thing, but even for premium, I'm not spending more than like $4.50, $5 to fill this thing up full from empty. So it's going to be really cheap in that aspect too. These things are very easy, at least the Honda and the Kawasaki, because they're big name brands. There's a huge aftermarket for them. You can find whatever parts you need. You can find OEM parts pretty easily. The only thing I know is tricky with these is the fairings. I'm not sure why that is, but that's the only downside to the Kawasaki versus the Grom as far as replacing parts, like if you were to drop it or something. But anyways, you can put, you know, internal mods and exhaust and stuff on it for relatively cheap because they're just so common. You can find, this is just an eBay iStunt exhaust. It's not anything really special. If you're big on name brand or anything, I can't see myself spending $800 on an exhaust for a $1,800 bike to begin with. But overall, maintenance is way cheaper and parts are way cheaper for this thing. It takes only a single quart of oil. Actually, might not even be, it's like 0.9 quarts. It's not even like a full bottle, but it's $10 for an oil change. If you change the filter, I guess it would be like $15 or $16 to change the oil on this thing. Tires cost me front and back replaced with somebody else mounting them. I think I spent like $180. So tires are really cheap. And again, something breaks on it. The market's so available with these that you can find everything relatively cheap off of eBay and Amazon. And even if you go for aftermarket brands, the stuff's still not expensive. Like the clutch in this thing was $35 for a reputable brand heavy duty clutch. Now we're going to go into the second reason, the second pro of owning one of these, and that's the versatility of these things. You can do literally anything with these things. They're so tiny, you can take them anywhere. You can go on that bike trail, you can go through those woods, you can put knobbies on it and make it an off-road bike. I've seen people on YouTube adventure these 125s. I think there was a guy with a Honda Monkey that went cross-country like 4,000 miles with one. You can stunt it out. That's what I went ahead and did. But I still ride this thing on a normal basis too. If you want to keep it stock and commute on it, you can do that too, and you're going to be saving so much money over having a car or even like a 600 just because of the gas and insurance and everything and maintenance. All of it's so much cheaper. So those two kind of go hand in hand as far as the versatility of it. But I've even seen people track race these things. I've seen people dragging knee. I've almost done it myself in a freaking roundabout just because these things are so light and flickable. So overall, they are very versatile. You can do just about anything you want with them. You can't really get that with a sport bike for the most part. I mean, I've seen people do it, but it's I wouldn't consider it to be practical to put knobbies on a sport bike and try and adventure it, just because that's not what they're built for. These things are very intermediate with everything, and that's why they can do anything. Now, the third and final pro to this bike is going to be how good they are to learn on. They're very, very forgiving. They're not going to be too fast for you to where you're uncomfortable. You can't really even take it on the expressway, which is a big fear of people's when they first get into riding, is going onto the expressway and doing expressway speeds. So in that aspect, it is a very, very good bike to learn on, because you can learn all of the things that you need to, like your clutch control and throttle control, and understanding how your front and rear brake work, because there's, you know, your front brake has a lot more stopping power than your rear. All those sorts of basics to understand. When it comes to learning on these things, you really can't mess up with things like you could on a sport bike. For the most part, this thing's not going to wheelie on you unless you literally are rev bombing it in first and then just dump the clutch. You're not going to really accidentally wheelie this thing just because it doesn't have, especially without any modifications, if it's completely stock, it barely has enough power to power wheelie, especially with a lightweight rider. Like, I only used to be like 120 pounds when I first got this thing, and it wouldn't come up from a power wheelie just because of the fact that I didn't even weigh enough to really crank that rear tire down and get it to stick or anything, especially not on those stock tires. But yeah, overall, they're just very, very forgiving. And tying in with the other pros that it has is they're going to be cheap to fix if you do break something on it. If you drop it, okay, you can find parts pretty easily for it. If you need new handlebars, or if you need a new set of grips or something, you can get axle sliders to protect everything for like 80-90 bucks. And if you burn up the clutch over time, you burnt it up after only 1,500 miles of learning, okay, it's a $35 part, go ahead and replace it. Alrighty, so now I want to move on to the cons of owning one of these 125s and riding it all the time, kind of as your main bike. Alright, perfect timing for this. I just downshifted. These things are slow. These things are slow. It tops out at 60. You're not going to have a very glorious 0 to 60 speed or anything. It's barely going to go anywhere. Especially if you start on this bike, you're going to end up probably getting bored of it in the aspect of you want something with a little bit more power. Now, that's not to say that you got to get rid of this bike, because, I mean, I've ridden 750cc, liter bikes, 600s. I've ridden them all. I've ridden naked bikes with bigger motors like the MT-07. I've ridden a lot of different bikes. I've ridden cruisers even. And overall, this thing still is one of my favorite bikes, just because of how light and simple it is. But anyways, these things are very slow. You're not going to be beating any sort of records with it. And if you want to go on the highway, you can probably do it, but you're going to be screaming at the red line the whole time. And if you want to go on the expressway, you literally can't do it. At least around me, the expressway speeds are 60 to 70. You're not going to catch up. It's just going to be more dangerous than anything for you to be on the expressway with this thing. When somebody's flying past you doing 90, they're not going to see this little bike either. So that's definitely one of the biggest cons, is because it's such a small, slow bike, you're going to, if you're learning on it, you're going to probably grow out of it pretty quickly. If you're like myself and you have a couple of other bikes, you're not really going to get bored of it because you got a use for it. If you want to putt around town, save some gas, do whatever with it, you can. But if you want to go and get on the highway, you got your other bike for that. So another con to these is going to be the fact that they don't teach you the same as a big bike. Because these things are so much smaller than the typical bike on the market, they're just not going to teach you the same stuff, aside from the basics, that a big bike is going to teach you. Now, when I say that, I'm talking about things like throttle control between this and a sport bike, or the braking power and weight of this versus a cruiser, the height of this versus an adventure bike, the tires versus any other big bike. It's just everything on these is way different. It's only got a 4-speed transmission and stuff too. These don't have all of the same maintenance even as other bikes, because this is an air-cooled motor. It doesn't have coolant or anything in it. So just overall, you're not going to have the same risks and learn the same things that you will on bigger bikes, because there's just in general less to these small bikes to learn and to have a risk for. So the third and final con to owning these 125s is going to be that they don't last as long. These Kawasaki's, and I said it earlier on in the video, I think the main reason that the Hondas tend to hold their value is because that they, even though it's still 125cc, they are a little bit more reliable. My brother's Kawasaki Z125, he bought it basically brand new. It was used, to be fair, so for all we know, something could have been done wrong in the break-in period or something with the original owner, but it had 180 miles. It was a 2023, used off the dealer's lot, and his blew up without even 1,500 miles on it. Now, on the other hand, though, I've beaten the piss out of mine, and I've got 5,000 miles, and it's pretty healthy. Single cylinders in general, especially, I've never messed with dirt bikes, but I know that it's a common thing with dirt bikes that after so many miles you have to just rebuild them entirely, and these end up being the same way, because they'll only last about 10 to 20,000 miles. On the higher end is 20,000, which compared to almost any other bike is not a lot. I have never seen one myself go over 15,000 miles. There's lots of people that have a different story, and they themselves have one that has put on a lot more miles with no issues and stuff. But overall, these things are a higher compression, smaller motor, with a single CC and stuff. With single cylinders, they tend to have, like, it's normal for them to have like blow-by and stuff. Piston rings get worn out easier. You got to rebuild the head. You got to adjust your valve lash and stuff. You got to do a lot more to keep these things going. And like I said, that's not just normal maintenance. That's like, you got to rebuild the thing. I would say close to like 50,000 miles is probably where you'll find most bikes lasting until they start having like major, like catastrophic engine issues. I had a Gixxer 750 with 38,000 miles, rode perfectly fine. A lot of the time you'll see these cruisers that have way more mileage on them. I mean, I don't know about Harleys. I know that they end up getting rebuilt all the time, but I've even seen like the Harleys with 100,000 plus miles on them, because these union workers will buy a Super Glide and commute to work with them and stuff, that sort of thing. So overall, these don't tend to last quite as long as a bike that you could buy a used sport bike and probably get more miles out of it for the same price. Well, I wouldn't say the same price as this, but like same price as a new one. Like if you spent $4,000 or something on a used sport bike or cruiser, you're gonna get more life than this thing would last from the showroom floor. And that's just the nature of these single-cylinder motors. So there you guys go. There's a pretty solid list of 3 pros and cons of these Z125s. Personally, I absolutely love mine. Overall, these 125cc bikes are a ton of fun, and if you've got the money sitting around, I wouldn't buy it as a main bike unless you're just starting off. I would really suggest these bikes only if you plan on keeping it as a second bike, whether, again, if you're just starting off or you're getting it as something to mess around with through town because you don't want to ride your leader bike through town or something. They are a ton of fun.